I think podcasts are still quite new in the wine industry, but that's exactly why they're so powerful. They allow us to slow down and listen to stories in a very human way. I first realized this when I began Giovani Enoici. Instead of just posting picture on Instagram, I wanted to give space to real voices, mistakes, and dreams. That's when I understood podcasts could help wine feel less intimidating and more authentic.
Welcome to the Italian Wine Podcast. This is the next generation with me, McKenna Cassidy. For the next episode, I invite you to explore with me what young adults are up to in the Italian wine scene. Let's feast on our discussion of Italian wine and culture. Grab a glass with us. Chin chin. Hello, everyone. I'm McKenna, your host on the Italian Wine Podcast, the Next Generation segment. And I'm joined by Charlotte. She's coming in from the pod. She is an awesome enologist and also global communicator through her Instagram, Vinellante. And we're so delighted to have her with us today to share her perspective on technology and the way we use it to share stories for young people, paving the way for the future of the wine industry. So welcome, Charlotte. So good to have you.
Thank you, McKenna, and it's a joy to be there.
This is such a treat. It's cool because your Instagram, Vinellante, and your communication style is a bit different from other interviewees that we've had before. Your motivation is coming from the inside out. You have a master's in enology. You work the past 72 hours of your life. You've been harvesting and doing all the chemistry. So I know we're all a little tired here, but it's really exciting to bring all of that firsthand experience to the pod. So if you would please just give us a brief overview of yourself, maybe where you're from in Italy and where you went to school, and then kind of who you work for now and what's going on with Vinellante.
Yeah, sure. As you said, I'm Charlotte and I'm an enologist. I'm based in Italy. I come from the province of Lecco and I created Giovani Enoici, a podcast where young people, professionals can share their stories. Vinellante is a personal project where I try to connect people, wine and communication. And Vinellante actually started in 2018 as a simple Instagram page. At the time, I was just sharing picture I took with my reflex with my camera during harvest or trips, and sometimes about my curiosity for beer, Irish whiskey, wine, and it wasn't a real project yet. The turning point came when I launched Giovani Enoici, my podcast. That's when I realized Vinellante could become a platform, not just for photos, but for stories, conversation, and giving space to young voices in the wine world. Today, it's really the home of my podcast and the community that's growing around it. And I studied enology and viticulture in the bachelor degrees in Milan. And now hopefully, I'm going to graduate in December with my master's in enology and viticulture. I studied my first year of the master in Asti and the second one in Verona.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So Lecco is in Lombardy. Were you growing up around vineyards? What was your wine experience like as a kid, or rather you liked whiskey and beer? So is that where you were exposed, or more later in school?
My area where I live in Como Lake, it's not properly a wine area. So it was a long journey to discover the wine world. Yeah, my curiosity grew up when I was a child.
You've managed to blend your love of storytelling in the world of wine through podcasting now. What does the podcast platform mean to you? And when did you realize that podcasts were a real tool for storytelling in the wine industry?
Well, unlike Instagram or YouTube, podcasting creates a more professional connection. People often listen in private moments and communicating, cooking, walking. That intimacy helps build trust and a deeper relationship with the audience. And also, storytelling works very well because it brings territories and producer to life. Interviews make the content authentic and returnable. Educational episodes sometimes can be effective, but only if they stay short, simple, and practical. And I think podcasts are still quite new in the wine industry, but that's exactly why they're so powerful. They allow us to slow down and listen to stories in a very human way. I first realized this when I began Giovani Enoici. Instead of just posting picture on Instagram, I wanted to give space to real voices, mistakes, and dreams. That's when I understood podcasts could help wine feel less intimidating and more authentic.
That's so well said. That's so cool. So let's rewind a little bit. How did your journey into wine production begin? Was it like right away or more of like a slow fermentation?
Yeah, absolutely slow fermentation. And I didn't grow up thinking I would become a winemaker, but wine was always part of my family meals and tradition. My curiosity grew up during my studies in enology. I wanted to understand what was really behind the glass, the land, the people, the choices in the vineyard and in the cellar. Today, I work mainly during harvest time, so moving between different wineries, not only in Italy, but also in France and abroad. For me, this is the best way to gain experience and learn from many different approaches. Founding Giovani Enoici was also a way to share this journey with others of my generation who believe wine is not only a product, but a culture and community. So yes, it took time, but now I can't imagine myself outside of wine. So
It's amazing how each person in the wine industry builds that personal connection that ultimately motivates them. Like through thick and thin, you find a mission in the wine scene and it becomes like all the more clear in time and relationships with others. So that's so cool. Let's dive in a little. I'm like really interested in your thesis work. You studied the role of podcasting in the wine market. What made you choose that topic?
I choose this topic because wine is often seen as complex or even intimidating, while podcasting is a modern, intimate, and very accessible medium. So I wanted to explore whether this format could open new ways to tell the story of wine in a fresh and engaging way. So I designed two surveys, one for the general podcast audience to understand listening habits and another focus specifically on wine podcasts. This allowed me to compare general trends with the more niche wine context without going too technical. It's curious because the trend of the global audience is similar to the general podcast audience, but not to the wine specific podcast audience. So this is really curious, but I'm still working on it. So that was surprised me most is that wine podcasts are still quite unknown. Many people don't even realize they exist. But at the same time, there is curiosity and potential. And when people do listen, they really value fresh content told in a light and energy style rather than purely technical information.
That really resonates that we have a handful of podcasts based on mostly like the liquor industry in the US. Like we have a handful of well known pods that people in the industry listen to, but I'm not sure that people outside of the industry listen to them. There's always like kind of those more academic corner of pods where you're like, oh, I'm seeking to learn more about wine. Okay, I can go learn here, but then it doesn't provide maybe that fresh, like real time, here's what's going on in the day to day in the industry, this acquisition, this change in wine, this new drink, etc. So it's cool because your motivation is to engage people within the industry, but also help that impact reach people outside of the industry and expand, it sounds like, the reach of what a wine podcast is, which is an awesome motivation. And So thank you for explaining that. That makes a ton of sense. Could you, when you're studying your thesis work, some of the methodology that you used to get that research or now produce your content, what methods are you using? And then how did you approach that study in what's now such a traditional industry, now being so innovated through these podcasts? Like, how did you study that, and what methodology did you use?
I used two surveys. I also interviewed different hosts of podcasts, and also I have data of my podcast. So I'm using statistical tools to analyze all the data that I collect, and it's really interesting to compare this data.
Nice, thank you. And then did you notice how influencer behavior was at all shifted based on the type of podcast that was produced, like a storytelling podcast or an interview specifically, or educational segments? How did that influence like the listener behavior?
Well, actually, the consumer behavior is influenced by podcasts. A lot of people in my sample said that they buy something or do something or have the intention to do something because they listen. For example, they discover a new winery in a specific place, or they become interested in some product by a podcast. So I'm in love more with try to use podcast for the study or for sure researcher, but it's also a powerful tools for marketing. So I think the industry has really to start to use this, and yeah.
So then what is the difference in effect from like YouTube videos or Instagram posts with podcasts? I know we've like touched on it a little bit, but could we just go in deeper on like what is the impact of podcasts on communication modernly? People are folding laundry while having their AirPods in and listening to a podcast, where before they would have to look at a screen to see like YouTube videos. You could have the audio in the background, but often there was some visual aspect. And now even podcasts are often including a visual aspect, like you can watch them talking. But personally, I see podcasts as just being versatile. Like you can almost have them on constantly. And I know some people have even gone on like podcast fasts because they listen to too many podcasts. But it seems to be such a versatile, accurate, and honest way to communicate, just like you're talking to a friend. What do you think about the podcast format?
So as we said, unlike Instagram or YouTube, podcasting creates more personal connection. People often listen in private moments, especially at home, I discovered, and also in car during traveling, and less in moments like cooking or sports moments or before going to bed. That intimacy helps build trust and deeper relationship with the audience. And in my samples, people said that they don't care really about a video because in that case, they prefer to use YouTube and watch a real video and not a podcast. But I think sometimes help to engage people also for the promotion of a podcast.
So, how does podcasting help demystify wine and make it more approachable for people who are curious but feeling intimidated by wine?
Podcasts use simple conversational language. They can make wine less intimidating and more approachable. You don't need to know everything about vintages or grapes varieties. It's enough to have a voice guiding you through the story.
Yeah, that's well said. It's literally one-sided conversation. Like, aside from your own thoughts, processing the information you're hearing, like a wine podcast is probably the least intimidating way, aside from Googling things or asking ChatGPT yourself, like to learn something about wine, because again, there's no feedback required. And I think that's what's intimidating, is that someone might call on me and ask me a question about wine that I don't personally know the answer to, and that's a bad feeling, and I don't want to feel that way. But a podcast is the perfect way to not have to feel that. And also that feeling needs to be approached and addressed at some point, but as an introduction, like there is a way without the expectation of feedback required. Learn something for purely the sake of learning it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also with my podcast, I discovered that it's easy to also build up a community. So what makes me most proud is that it has become more than just a podcast. It helps young people find harvest opportunities in solid and even prestigious wineries. And it's creating a community where we all get to know each other, share opportunities, and support one another. And we can really share our doubts, our dreams, our everything.
I love how you said that before. You said mistakes and dreams. And
Yeah.
I like to hold both of those things moving forward. We have to be able to do that because if we shove away mistakes at the risk of feeling shame or something, we can't live like that. We have to have those doubts, those dreams, those mistakes. I one of my favorite psychologists, Brene Brown, she actually says like stay awkward, brave, and kind. And
Wow.
sometimes she said awkward, brave, and kind. And she's a professional like researcher and is just an amazing speaker and etc. But I always repeat that to myself if I ever experience those moments of embarrassment when I was called on and I didn't know something maybe I should have. But staying awkward, brave, and kind, it remind like what you said remind me of that those dreams and those mistakes. We can hold both. We're strong enough to hold both. Let's talk a little bit more about the youngest generation, the next generation. I was looking at your website and you have recently interviewed some very cool young people in the wine scene. You not only talk to people who are in production, but people who are in marketing or involved in sales or art or behind the bar. There's like a different angles for everyone to take part, obviously. So, how do you think these people you can give an example or just in general, how are these Gen Z and millennials like reshaping the wine scene? Everyone plus 21 in the US, plus 18 in the EU. How are these people taking part in the future of the wine industry?
Well, I think that Gen Z and millennials are changing the rules. They want transparency, values, and authenticity, not just label, but the story behind it. And yes, like cocktails and beer and are trendy, but wine has history and culture. And if we tell it in the right way, wine can be just as exciting. And my advice to traditional winemakers, don't worry about perfect sound or tech. Just be honest, share your story, your passion. People connect with voices, not with microphones. So what I love to do this podcast is the connection that I at the end had with the other young people. And yeah, that's amazing. So this is what I suggest.
Thank you, Charlotte. That is so true, and by your own experience, so good to share. Okay, let's do some rapid fire questions as we wrap up our pod today. Okay, you with me?
Okay.
Um, if your podcast had a signature wine, what would it taste like, or what wine would it be?
It would be young, energetic, a bit raw, but full of potential. Maybe a fresh Sangiovese with a lot of character.
Thank you for picking one of my favorite wine grapes. Genius. Um, what is the biggest winemaking myth? As an enologist, the biggest winemaking myth you wish people would stop believing about wine?
For young people, that expensive always means better. Wine is about people and places, not just price.
Okay, you can share a bottle of wine with any person, alive or deceased. Who is it?
Oh, this is such an emotional question, but I answer with my two grandfathers. Absolutely.
I bet they would be excited to share it with you as well. Okay, one last one. If you have the weirdest food and wine pairing you've ever loved, what was it?
In 2020, during my first harvest in Romagna, in Fattoria Zerbina, the winemaker and the cellar hand used to cook for the young people that comes for the harvest time. And during one of these barbecue, we drank Dom Perignon 2008 with Salamella by hand. So it was crazy, a strange match, but unforgettable.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, Charlotte, I can't thank you enough for sharing your such well-formed perspective, your firsthand experience, your thoughts, your dreams, your mistakes. Thank you for sharing all of that with us today. Where can everyone find you? I know we'll put it in the show notes, but where can we find your content online?
Well, you can find me on Instagram as Vinellante, and you can listen the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and all the platforms. And yeah, that's all.
Heard that. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Keep turning up the volume on wine culture. We'll be back soon. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you. Thank you
Cheers.
too. Bye.
Tante grazie. Thanks so much for being here with me today. Remember to catch our episodes weekly on the Italian Wine Podcast, available everywhere you get your pods. Salute.